What's a good word, everyone? It's your boy DKB here. I just want to say thanks for all the support. The channel's been steadily growing, and the number you see below, you can drop a text, shoot a voicemail, any ideas, topics, collabs, etc. you guys want to see. I'll include them in future videos and live streams, and I'll catch you again. Be easy. What's the good word, Jets fans? It's your boy DKB here. We've heard word from Aaron Glenn all off season about Joe Tippmann being in a competition with new center Josh Myers coming over from the Packers, who also has a history of Justin Fields dating back to Ohio State, and it's lived up to that billing, right? I think consistently you've heard players mention it, such as John Simpson. You've heard Aaron Glenn talk about it. I believe you've even heard Justin Fields touch on the difference between the two just a little bit, but ultimately two things here. The first being Joe Tippmann's coming into the third year in the league, right? Which is huge for him for a number of factors. He's been one of the few offensive linemen that hasn't had to flip-flop between numerous positions. He did get some initial run at guard, and I feel like it was somewhere between maybe 1 and 3 games, and he actually looked really, really good at that spot. But before injuries ended up opening up that center position for him, we didn't really know what we were going to get, right? I think a lot of people expected that he was one of the top centers coming out of that draft class, but still, there was the height factor to him. He's one of the tallest centers in NFL history, coming in around 6'6". There's going to be leverage concerns, and then of course utilization, right? What is it going to look like for him? Because even with the size component he's bringing, he's much more of an athletic specimen than people would initially give him credit for, right? And so when you looked at him as a guard, you've seen elite pulling ability, right? With him being able to go and get out there on the edge, reach the second level, really eat up space pretty quickly in order to create a lane for Breece Hall and company. And in the center position, you can argue it's going to be the same thing, which is why after being able to accumulate a year's worth of experience as a starter, after going through a little bit of the transition from becoming a center to becoming a guard to becoming a center again, and then of course the stability of just the offense that Aaron Glenn and Tanner Engstrand are creating, there's a reason why PFF is considering Joe Tippmann one of the 6 offensive linemen that they believe are ready for a true breakout in 2025. And I think it's well worth it, right? There's some very interesting numbers that get pointed out in this article, but if you just break open the film and you look at the play specifically where he is asked to get to a space in order to create a lane, as opposed to having to dominate the man in front of him or stall and hold up a block, he looks like an expert at it, right? So since week 9 of 2023, Tippmann has a 70.6 PFF overall grade, which ranked him 14th among centers who had at least 500 snaps. And then once he got into the 2024 season, which is where he actually got a chance to start the entirety, he was 9th overall in PFF grade, and he was 8th in PFF. So he's essentially a top 10 center last year, one in which I think a lot of people, depending on how you want to cut up the numbers and what different other little variables you're looking at, a lot of people feel like maybe he's a fringe top 10 type guy, and kind of underwhelmed a bit, if you imagine. But if you're talking about a top 12 center period in the league, you're doing really, really well for yourself, especially considering you were able to grab this guy in the second round, and there was a lot of roadblocks to him potentially becoming successful. You look at injuries to the partners to the left and right to him. Again, the transitioning between guard to center, and then overall just the overwhelming amount of passing attempts that he would have actually had to block for. And I don't know where that falls in comparison to the rest of the league, but it's no secret that the Jets went pass heavy with the hopes that Aaron Rodgers could throw them into a deep playoff run. And so if anything, I would say things look even better for him as we look to become more balanced in 2025. Now, one of the interesting pieces is that when you look at Instring's offense and what he helped run with Ben Johnson last year, he was fourth in outside zone run concepts, right? Now, that being one of the highest rates, you assume that's going to be part of the DNA of this Jets roster. And one of the things that we've been talking about is how well Joe Tippmann does in these particular concepts where he's going to be asked to pull. He's going to be asked to go out there and get around the tackle. He's going to be asked to try to reach a linebacker or maybe a nickel guy in the second level. And he's only come behind Frank Ragnow in terms of the ability to execute these plays at a high level. In fact, he has a 92.9 PFF run blocking grade on these specific outside zone run concepts. And Frank Ragnow is a monster in and of itself, right? His retiring was unexpected for the Lions, but Frank Ragnow has been one of those guys right up there with your Creed Humphreys of the world that, depending on the concept you're employing, these are the pinnacle of guys operating these type of schemes, right? You look at your Kelce's, for example, as another type of individual. But really, when you peek behind the scenes, the competition aspect feels more simply like the New York Jets wanted to make sure exactly what they were getting out of a player in Joe Tippmann, and so it really was more of a push. So the competition aspect is legitimate, right? But it doesn't feel like there's any true risk in Josh Myers beating Joe Tippmann out for the center position in and of itself, and that would be the hope, right? In a world where Josh Myers ends up winning, that ends up putting a huge damper on Joe Tippmann's career prospects, at least with the New York Jets, and probably ends up immediately making him some kind of trade bait, right? But between the athleticism, between being able to go out there and have Justin Fields, who is going to be extremely mobile, is going to be able to help him as well when it comes to maneuvering the pocket, not needing to hold on to blocks as much, and then a lot of these RPO concepts where you can get even more tricky with someone like Joe Tippmann. Sky's the limit for him, and I understand the reason for him being thrown in this breakout category. So really, really excited for him. I think the further into the end, going into the fourth year of these rookie contracts for Joe Tippmann, and you look at JMS, John Michael Smith, for example, that essentially those two were going to be one of the top centers drafted during that class. I think the farther we get into these rookie contracts ending, the more favorable it looks that Joe Douglas picked the better center out of that class. So we'll see what happens. Let me know what you guys think, though. Is Joe Tippmann definitely due for a breakout? And do you think he ends up breaking into maybe top 5 center status? I think he can secure his role as a top 10 guy. But if he breaks into top 5, then we should have the foundations of an elite offensive line coming back together. It'll feel like the good old 09, 010 days. So let me know what you guys think. I'll catch you guys again. Peace.